Drivers don't notice cyclists. I can hear drivers behind me coming up really quickly, and to imagine like kids trying to ride their bikes around these streets, and parents and older people, like if my grandparents lived in San Francisco, they definitely wouldn't feel comfortable. My name's Patrick Trauber. I live in San Francisco. I work at Twitter. I bike to work every day. I used to work in the mayor's office. I joined the mayor's office in 2009. After I left the mayor's office in 2010, and I was commuting to work on my bike every day, and as I started to notice, there were like areas of the city that just had no bike lanes and felt really dangerous. And since I had done a lot of work on in the mayor's office on homicide rates, I was curious, how many people are getting hit by cars and killed every year? How big is this problem? I was particularly interested in how many people are being hit on their bikes, and I just couldn't find great data from the city on how many people were being hit every year. For me, aside from just highlighting the scale of the problem in terms of numbers, it's really important to talk about the victims as people, which is, it's what they were. They were friends and family members of, people throughout the city and throughout the state. And after it was published, a lot of the colleagues and friends and family members of the victims reached out to me directly and said, thanks for publishing this thing. I didn't realize how big of a problem it was. I didn't know it was just my kid who was killed in the city that year. To highlight one example, Dylan Mitchell was killed a couple years ago, and I've gotten to know his mom, and their family has been affected and will be affected forever by the fact that Dylan was killed on a street in San Francisco.
San Francisco is a great city to bike and walk in, and the city isn't moving fast enough to make it safer. So people continue to die. An average of 30 people die every year. 800 people are injured. 200 of them are severely injured. So I want the city to hurry up and get its act together. Brian Goebel, I'm the editor of Human Streets. We tell stories about people who are killed and injured in traffic violence in San Francisco, people killed while walking, biking, and driving, and we're also pushing the city to make the streets safer much quicker. The mayor issued an executive directive last year after 2 bicyclists died, and so we're now getting parking protected bike lanes on 7th and 8th Streets, for example, and some other improvements because the mayor got behind that. For many families who have loved ones who are killed or injured, the biggest thing that I hear is they don't feel any sense of justice because there is no accountability for drivers. Drivers who injure or kill are rarely charged. There's vehicular manslaughter, but that is hard to prove in court, and our prosecutors often make the decision not to prosecute drivers. And the way these things play out is in the civil courts, actually, where families file wrongful death lawsuits. And I've heard from some families who do file those suits, when they win that verdict, that is some sense of justice that they feel. But they're angry and they're frustrated.
We have an entire police force dedicated to reducing the homicide rate and making sure we don't have violence on the streets, but there's very little being done to prevent to drop the traffic fatality rate, which is almost, it's about half of the homicides on a year-by-year basis. So I think it's a much bigger problem than the city thinks right now, and I'd like to see them act with more urgency.